I was invited by a church in Arlington Heights to present. Before the actual presentation, they asked me to go in for a rehearsal. And this young priest with his board were listening very attentively. And today I've been more outspoken on Sharia and Islamists. Back then, 3 years ago, I was more, I don't want to say PC, but I wasn't attacking Islam. And I still don't. I mean, there are good moderate Muslims who need to speak up, like Dr. Zohdi Jasser, who's usually on Fox News. He works really diligently to fight against CARE. But this priest, after I was done, he said, I will never allow this sort of poison to be brought into my church. And the title of the presentation was going to be persecution of Christians in Iraq. He said, if you want to present in my church, I will bring a cleric to debate you, and that's the only way you will present. Otherwise, I know Islam is a religion of peace. I have read the Quran through and through. And to your point, absolutely, there are many Catholics, for example, that have become liberal and don't really care about this cause.
Let me add really quickly, there is a phenomenon out there that you may have heard of. It is called Chrislam. It is, I'm not making that word up, that is an actual word that is being used now for some of these interfaith dialogue movements. And it is basically, it is an effort by Islam to co-opt those with whom they are dealing. There is a saying from Sayyid Qutb which says something like, the chasm between Jahiliyyah and Islam is wide, and a bridge is not to be built over it so that the two sides may mix with one another, but only so that the infidels may come over to Islam. And that is the reason that they engage in these things.
Dr. Ramelah.
Thank you. I would like just to share with you an experience happened to me last year when I get close to the mic. Doesn't work when I'm out.
No. You're good. You're good.
Anyway, I got an email from a rabbi from New Jersey, and he was really concerned about happening in Christian church in Egypt, and he asked me to meet with him. I met with him with another 2 rabbis, and after we finished talking, I supposed to be there to schedule with them and, how you call it, a speech like whatever I said this morning. Disappeared, they called our vice president and told her if Ashraf could find a Coptic priest. And I called my Coptic priest, there's no one going to speak in synagogue, that's for sure. I called the guy, the rabbi, after 2-3 weeks, and I told him, what's the problem? You called me because you wanted that I come to speak, and after that you're looking for a Coptic priest. He said, well, you're speaking from the point of view of far right. And I said, okay, sorry. Do you like that I come to your synagogue and I tell Copts get crazy and they killing themselves? I mean, what you want that I say? And finish there. I don't hear from them anymore. So it's not only the Christian, it's also the Jewish. They have certain sect of them that they don't like to hear the truth about what's happening.
If I can just make one quick wrap-up before we go to the next question. One of the things that we've encountered as we've obviously pursued this issue from our organization is that frequently what we have seen sophisticated groups like CARE and the Islamic Society of North America do is effectively teach us to be tolerant of intolerance, which was nothing ever conceived of under the First Amendment. And yet, because we are a country that is conceived in liberty, and because we are, for the most part, a Judeo-Christian country, that can conspire against us. And they use our inherent good natures against us. And that's, I think, a lot of what we run into here. I don't think necessarily all of these priests or rabbis or whatever who are making these kinds of connections with these interfaith dialogues and essentially being rolled are bad people. I just think they are somehow having their own faith and belief and tolerance used against them. Ma'am.
Claire, I came to see you, and I want to thank you for that beautiful speech. It's very well organized, very articulate. I love the way you speak. And I'm getting the impression that Islam is not just religion, it's also political, and it's also military. And my question is, my question is, where under the United States Constitution does it support not just a religion, but also political, military subjugation and subversion? I don't read that there.
Thank you for your kind words. I really appreciate it, and the fact that you drove so far to be with us here today. Thank you. And you're getting at a very good point here. The First Amendment defense of freedom of religion, of belief, is intended to support religions that are devotional in nature. That means it includes protection of prayer, worship, dietary laws, restrictions, fasting, perhaps pilgrimage. That is what is protected under the First Amendment, and proselytizing. Let's add that too. But when you depart from that, and Islam most certainly does depart from that and becomes a legal, a military, a political, and a social system, a complete way of life, as Muslims themselves would say, then those who do so run afoul not of the First Amendment, they are in contradiction of Article 6 of the Constitution, and that article says, the Constitution of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land in the United States of America.
If I could, I'd like to toss that question to Congressman Walsh, because, no, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I mean, this is a particularly tough slog for members of Congress who frequently are kind of caught between Islam and Islamism, and sometimes get swept up in the whole, the whirlpool of political correctness. I'm just wondering how you deal with that and what your colleagues deal with it as.
There's an inherent desire in Congress, in government, to, again, according to the First Amendment, to respect all religions and all professions of faith. The intersection that's dangerous is just what is said. In practice and in theory, Islam is not just a religion. And so as a member of Congress in our government, we have to make the decision, especially when we're at war. I mean, this is what drives me crazy, working in the job I'm working in right now. We have people around the world. We have people around the world that want to kill us. I don't care what religion they are. I don't care what their hair looks like. I don't care what they ate for dinner last night. We have people around the world that are trying to kill us. As a member of Congress, duty-bound to uphold the Constitution, I want to protect my people from that. That comes first. And we are so, Fred, you said it, we are so afraid in this country to offend people. We're so politically correct in this country, it's going to get us killed. We have, it goes back to what I said in my introduction to the last panel. We need to call things what they are.
Let me take, this is actually a question to the panel, from the panel. I've never seen that, but
Not to the panel,
why
from
not?
the panel. I'd like it to be brought up, not to the panel.
All right. This is what we want to talk about. Can we talk about the Nineveh Plain area in the northern part of Iraq, which is it now a safe zone for Christians, or is it trying to become as much?
It's trying. That's exactly what I wanted to talk about, because I believe that's really crucial for our fate as Assyrian Christians in Iraq. Nineveh Plain, Article 125 in the Constitution of Iraq states that we as a minority, ironically we're indigenous people, but we're a minority now, can have our own administrative area where we can practice our religion and study openly, just like an Iraqi would. But there has to be pressure applied from the American government, put on Iraq, on the Iraqi government, in order for us to take that, to have that safe zone. If I may, you need to see, Americans who do not know where Nineveh Plain area is, there is a map, if you don't mind turning that on. So what I'd like to ask Congressman Walsh is, how can you support us and push our agenda forward? And not only for you, I'd like to ask my American friends. We have two fantastic grassroots movement organizations. AMO, which we have representation here, American Mesopotamian Organization, and also Assyrian American National Coalition, their representation is here as well.
Yeah. Yep.
This is the Nineveh Plain area, as you see, and on the bottom it shows where it is located in Iraq. And that's what we want to have. We want to have indigenous people protecting it. So we want our own police force there. We want to build a hospital there. We want to build communities there. We want to build universities there. So it is very imperative for us, in order for us not to become extinct, to have a region that we call our own. But the difference between what we want and what the Kurds have and want is Kurds want to secede from Iraq. We don't want to secede from Iraq. We want to live under the federal government and the federal law. But we want our own safe zone. So you as Americans can voice your vote, your opinions on this to your state representatives and put pressure on them. Therefore, in turn, they will put the pressure on the American and Iraqi government. So there are two organizations. I'm not a political, our organization is not political, so we can't really get involved, but we support AMO, American Mesopotamian Organization, if you want to look them up, and also Assyrian American National Coalition. And I believe the representative here has some forms. If you want to get involved, he can pass them out right now. That is probably the single most important thing, aside from prayer, that is the single most important thing you can get involved with. And Martin Umaran is passing out the forms.
All right,
Yes.
Christine, I gave you the microphone. Did you? Yes, sir. It's your question.
Okay, thank you. There's a group at the Moody Church and the Coptic churches in the Chicago area, as well as about a dozen other churches that are starting to wanting to take action. We're starting an organization. In the last several months, we've done quite a bit of research and investigation into what should we do, what should we focus on, and we've learned a lot about what's going on in the landscape of organizations that are anti-Islamization. And there are hundreds, right? There's media organizations and blogs, there's research organizations, there are activist organizations. But we found several gaps, and we wanted to focus on, I'm a strategy consultant by training, so I'm looking at a strategy to develop here. And there's two critical gaps, and I'm looking for your reaction to this. One, that there's very little focus on the root cause versus the symptoms. So the root cause is the advance of Islamization. All these symptoms are, we've got refugees to deal with, we've got people being killed, we've got people being persecuted in all different ways, we've got our laws being changed. These are all symptoms of the root cause that we've got organizations like CARE and Hamas in the world that are pushing Islamization. So we need to kind of focus on that as a very focused issue. The second key gap is because we've got hundreds of organizations out there, we do not have a unified voice. We don't have a representative body behind that unified voice. And so we tend to have, forgive me for this, but if you look on the internet and look at anti-Islam rhetoric, it looks crazy because the views are very splintered. Lots of the voices are very sensationalized, and there's not a kind of a reasoned voice behind it. There's not a good housekeeping seal of approval behind. Here are the authors and spokespeople that we are all behind. So those would be the two key gaps. We're not focusing on the root cause. We don't have a clear, single, unified voice and representative body behind that. So I would argue that's what's needed to get results. Looking for your reaction to that.
Father Roderick.
I think if I could bounce off both questioners a little bit, but that is true. There is not a central focus. I think if you can get caught up in looking at the trees rather than the forest. Sometimes the problem is just looking at the forest and not the trees. But there's not one single country which is ruled by Islamic law or stipulates that Sharia is the source of legislation in that country that provides an environment of security and equality for its non-Muslim citizens. Not one. So the question really is, for us in the United States, is why isn't there a policy then by the United States government to recognize non-Muslim populations within Islamic countries, and those can be identified as a matter of fact, as populations of special concern? Once you make the recognition that these are populations of special concern, that changes your whole foreign policy perspective. And so you, in order to act according to that perspective, you have to do things like supporting autonomous province in the Nineveh Plain, supporting the South Sudanese, supporting the Biafrans, supporting the other populations that are under great pressure. But unless there is a single focused policy by the United States government, foreign policy makers, that's really impossible to do. There's no grounds for it. But the facts are there, that wherever these non-Muslim populations exist in the countries that are called Islamic, and that can be defined factually, there is not an environment of security or equality. And therefore, you can base a policy on that.
Anybody else have anything they wanted to add to that? Had a gentleman over here with a question.
My name is Daniel, and I want to thank you all first for taking the time and the effort. And here's what we have. Knowing what we know, that the terror of Islam is caused by Islam. It's being taught by the Quran itself. Why don't we have more congressmen and women being more outspoken? By the way, I commend you, Congressman Joe Walsh. You, that I know, you're one of them, one of the most outspoken. Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, the other one that I know, and Alan West. So my question to you, why don't you, do you guys first lobby other congressmen and women to be more outspoken about the fact, which is just a fact now, what the Islams are doing in their terror is coming directly from the Bible, which is according to what we heard and what we know, which is their teaching. It's the core of their teaching. Thank you.
Just briefly, it's probably not much more complicated than just fear.
Mm-hmm.
Fear. And again, the tendency in this country to be politically correct. But you know what? It's got to start, and you've got a few of us, and it'll grow.
Well, fortunately, Congressman Walsh is part of what I see, and we spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill, of a growing coalition of members, right now mostly Republicans, I have to be honest with you, who are beginning to understand the ramifications of Islamism and what the threat doctrine really means. But he's right. It's hard to come out and speak about this because the one place you know you will be attacked immediately is the media. And before we go to this next question, let me just give you an example of that. One guy who has come out and done this in a big way and has taken a lot of heat is Joe's colleague Peter King, who is the chairman of the Committee on Homeland Security. Congressman King was at One Police Plaza on Monday with the American Islamic Leadership Coalition, talking not just about defending Commissioner Kelly and going after groups like the Muslim Student Association, but tearing into an organization like CARE, whom he reminded us all is an unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terrorist financing trial in the history of the United States. But even though that's true and has been upheld by an appellate court, he still takes the slings and arrows of that outrageous fortune. He's got to have backup. So does Joe Walsh. So does Michelle Bachmann. And that comes from organizations like yours. And believe me, the more you stand up, the more it is easier for them to speak out.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be here. Thank you all. I say all the time that we're in war in this country, really against both political parties, who have both grown this debt that will bankrupt our kids and our grandkids if we don't do something about it. Shame on us. But you know what? We're at war around the world right now with people who want to kill us. And until we all speak out and until we all display real bravery and call it what it is, it will kill us. They will hurt us. Every single day, there are people trying to get their hands on weapons to kill Americans. Here, not just over there, here. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did you want to say something? Oh, okay. Yes.
I have a comment on how you can shut down the ACLU. When they file lawsuits, if they win the case, the law allows them to recover their legal fees from the defendants. So all they have to do is win 50% of their cases to break even. So let's change the law where if they file the lawsuit, win or lose, they pay for it.
You mean like they do in Great Britain?
Yeah.
Loser pays.
Yeah, exactly.
That's been the kind of tort reform that has been. I'm sorry, Congressman Walsh is not here. I don't think he's a member of the Judiciary Committee, but that has been debated for years in this country, and unfortunately, hasn't gotten very far. One of the reasons it hasn't gotten very far is because the trial bar, which is now, I think, calling themselves the American Association of Law and Justice or something like that, totally ill-named, has essentially prevented that from happening. Question back here, sir?
Yeah, we're just hidden here behind the photographers, so thank you very much. Two comments and one question. First comment, my name is Kamal Ibrahim. I'm Egyptian Christian Coptic. I grew up in Egypt, and I thank you very much, Claire. Excellent presentation, accurate. Just I want one comment. I read the Quran in Arabic. I read it in English, and there is a big difference between the real Quran in Arabic and translation in English. The translation done always by Muslims. The only one translation done last century by a British, and that's not counted anymore. So most of the translation showing the good side of the verses. Every verse can be read differently, but most of the verses in Quran which invite attacks and killing, etc., are polished and presented in the Quran English literature, English translation differently. Mm-hmm. So we have to be aware of that. Second thing, when we talk about CARE and other organizations, and we think they're very benign organization, we have to be careful because one of the principles in Islam is called fatwa, called taqiyya. And taqiyya means you are allowed to lie as much as you want as long as you protect your brother Muslim. So anything you hear from Islam, nice and polished and good, it's just applying their taqiyya, and they get the reward for that in heaven because they're lying to you to protect his brother. Final thing I want to say that CARE started with a small idea between few physicians, one of them was in Christ Hospital, and got the money support from everywhere outside the country, Muslim, including Saudi Arabia, and now they're a very big organization. Why? We don't see that in the Christian side. Why we don't have organization to work as a leader? We have many organizations like this one talking about the problem with Islam in America, but they are not one unit. We need one organization to take the leadership, and I'm sure Christians have enough money to combat the money goes to CARE. So we need leadership here. Finally, we are very concerned because who knows Islam very well like us, we see it coming to US. And if we don't wake up, it's not going to be 50, 100 years from now. Probably within 20 years, you will see effect and people asking to apply Sharia on you and me. Thank you.
They've already started.
Dr. Ramelah made the point about taqiyya earlier. But I will say, going back to something that Claire said, and we'll take this question in just a minute, there are a lot of folks, some of them candidates for office, who believe that no matter what happens, our Constitution and our laws will protect us. They're only as good as the judges that interpret those laws and constitutional protections, or as good as the legislators we elect, or as good as the people like you that go to the polls and make sure the letter of the law is upheld to enforce the spirit of the law. Ma'am.
Thank you. This question is for Claire. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was wonderful. One thing that would help persecute Christians in other countries and our own national security is if we really could rid the Muslim Brotherhood and CARE from all levels of our government. They were there under the Bush administration. It's worse under the Obama administration. What is your confidence level that even if we have a Republican president, that will happen. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your kind comments. The Muslim Brotherhood has been infiltrating the United States government since World War II. I don't know how many of you have perhaps had the chance to read Ian Johnson's A Mosque in Munich. And that book talks about how the Muslim Brotherhood had fled the Middle East, fled Egypt under pressure by various governments there, found refuge in Europe. The Nazis had taken up and formed networks with them and also back into the Middle East during World War II. As World War II ended, the Nazis are defeated. The United States, the OSS, the predecessor, the forerunner of the CIA, picked up those Nazi networks of the Muslim Brothers and began to run them. Now, who was running whom is the question. President Eisenhower received Saad Ramadan, that is the son-in-law of Hassan al-Banna, in the White House in 1952. That's how far back this goes. So when you talk about the infiltration, it is deep, it is of long standing, and yes, different leadership at the top of our administration, our government, would help insofar as, you know, the appointed offices in the cabinet, for instance, would bring new leadership there in those different departments and their appointees on down. That would have a huge effect. But let's realize that this has penetrated our society at every level. It's not just government, it is academia, it's the media, it's our social system at large in general. So this is going to take an effort by all of society, and that's why your participation is so important, your knowledge and understanding of this, and the way you spread that to others that you know in your circle of friends and family.